FBI released a newly declassified document relating to the agency's investigation of the September 11th terror attacks. It detailed contacts and movements of the hijackers in the planning stages leading up to the attacks, but it did not make definitive conclusions on whether the Saudi government was complicit in the attacks, as some families had anticipated. Earlier this month, President Biden ordered the DOJ to review the documents for release. Lester Munson served as a staff director for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and is now a principal with the BGR Group. He is live with us tonight. Welcome to Prime.
Good evening.
So the documents are here. I have them, printed them out, read them. They were kind of inconclusive. It was kind of anticlimactic. What should we get out of this first document dump?
My impression is that there was indeed some collaboration at very low levels with the hijackers from some folks who were either working for or affiliated with the Saudi government. I don't think that necessarily means that the higher levels in Saudi Arabia itself were involved in the plotting. I think that's quite a stretch, but there's no doubt that there are some issues that should be explored here. This is something that has interested Congress for quite some time. A lot of legislation has passed trying to get at this information. So it's good that this is coming out, and I hope we see the rest of it.
And how many more documents like this can we expect? This was, I think, 16 pages. Why release them in this way as opposed to just publishing everything in a big document dump?
That's a great question. I think we have to ask the Biden administration that. There's no doubt a lot of review going on by the State Department and other agencies to make sure that none of our sources and methods and none of our channels of communication are compromised here. The U.S. has a lot of national interests with Saudi Arabia. Let's remember it's an important country for us, not just because of its oil, but because of the fight against terrorism and other things. So it's not just a no-brainer. It's not a one-off question. And I think it's important that folks in the government weigh these factors and make a good decision that's in the best interest of the country.
Although it could be argued that maybe Saudi Arabia should also be investigated for its terrorism ties, right? Most of the hijackers came from that country. There is some indication that at least some levels of government were involved in the planning phases of this and other attacks, right? It is hard to measure how well the security apparatus is working when nothing happens. And I'm talking about yesterday on the anniversary of 9/11. So the alarm level has to be high every year. Are you aware of any terror threat that was intercepted or prevented yesterday?
I am not aware. I am not currently. I do not currently have access to classified information. I presume the very, very able professionals that we have on the job at the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and other law enforcement agencies were very aware of it. We really do have the best of the best working to defend our country. And frankly, I think the record in the 20 years since 9/11 provides testimony to that fact. We have not had another mass attack on U.S. soil since 9/11/2001.
I want to pivot a little bit. The Capitol Police now are being allowed to use deadly force if necessary for next weekend's rally in D.C. Is this the right move, in your opinion?
Well, I think that's unnecessarily provocative to let that kind of thing out. There's no doubt that there are real security concerns when certain groups are gathering in Washington. I hope our law enforcement officials take them as seriously as possible. I hope we're much better prepared than we were on January 6th of this year. But I think making announcements like that is inflammatory and not really necessary.
So what's the best way to deter something like January 6th from happening again?
Well, I think having a robust security presence. I worked in the U.S. Capitol and the area there for about 26 years. I can tell you they have a very good police department there. Those folks need to be empowered to make the right decisions they see on the ground. I think the investigation into what happened on January 6th will likely reveal some poor decision making at the senior levels in management between the members of Congress and the police. I think they should have been better prepared. They need to be very realistic about what's going on and take preventative measures and not let things get out of control. I don't think that means they're to blame for what happened, but I think they need to have the ability and the tools necessary to do their job.
And now that it's been 20 years since 9/11, yesterday marking 20 years, I want to talk to you about Guantanamo Bay and the 39 prisoners who are still there.
Sure.
They've been held for years, even decades now. No charges have been brought against many of them. They don't have basic trial or legal rights. Is it time to shut Guantanamo Bay down?
Well, I don't think so, but I do think it's a fair question. There's no doubt that the existence of Guantanamo Bay is useful to our enemies. They like to make light of it. They like to point out that the U.S. doesn't respect the rights of the people it captures. I think they're wrong, but they do get to do that. I think we should be extremely mindful about the security threat that the people at Guantanamo Bay pose to the United States. We should not release them until we believe that the war on terror is completely over. Frankly, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So I think a lot of those folks are likely to be in prison for the rest of their lives. I'm totally fine with that. But I think we as a nation ought to be making a decision about what's in our own best interest. If we decide, and that should be a conversation happening between the president and Congress, that it's better for us to close Guantanamo Bay, so be it. If we think it's better to keep it open and keep those folks locked down where they should be, I think that's the right decision. That's what I would endorse.
But why not charge them then?
Well, you don't necessarily have to.
Because it's in a third country, because it's in Guantanamo Bay. I mean, why not bring them here, charge them, and lock them up for the rest of their lives?
Well, they're not entitled to that kind of treatment. I think a military tribunal is perfectly appropriate if that's what the U.S. decides it wants to do. These are not folks who are entitled to our constitutional protections. These are people who took violent action against the United States of America and tried to threaten the security of our citizens and our soldiers and those of us who were defending us out in harm's way. So they really don't have any rights in our system, and that's fine.
And quickly, before we go, I want to get your take on the biggest post 9/11 security challenge and the biggest success. I imagine the biggest success is that we haven't had another September 11th type attack.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think we've done a pretty good job of defending the homeland since 9/11. I think the biggest threat to us right now is a rising China. China poses a threat across the spectrum: economic activities, military activities, security activities in other countries. It is working to undermine our relations with any number of countries. Its values are not our values. It does not believe in the rights of the individual. It believes that people should be subsumed to the larger entity. That is totally anathema to Americans. It is a threat to our way of life, and we're going to have to deal with that threat across the board. And should be galvanizing our policymakers. It's going to be an issue for generations.
All right, Lester Munson, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate having you.
Thank you.